Good evening, everybody. I want to welcome you here to the Prog Monster. My name is Murph. I am the host of this show, a show dedicated to progressive rock and other forms of rock music. So we're here tonight to do the last episode of Decades. It's a mini-series we've been running for the last 4 weeks, and it's not too hard to see who we're going to be doing tonight. This will be Rush. I just want to apologize first that I did not look back at a classic rock album last night. Had a bit of muscle spasms, plus we had election night, so I just didn't have it in me to do it. So I let it go. Hopefully my back is gonna start coming around a bit. It came around a bit this week, but I'm still having issues with it. Anyways, we're going to be doing this episode of this mini-series that we're going to finish it up tonight. This will be episode 4, and this is called Decades, in which I'm going to talk about the albums that go for one entire decade. So usually what I'm doing is the first album through to their 10-year later albums. So in this case, we're doing Rush. Rush has 10 albums in this period, so basically about one a year, although they had a couple in 75, and I think there was a year, the year of 83 there was no album. So anyways, we're going to get to it. So for those of you who know, I'm a Rush fan. They're my favorite band. I wouldn't say that I'm one of the Rush cult, as Geddy Lee put it, the cult of Rush, and it is a cult. There's no doubt about it. I wouldn't say I'm one of them. I'm not nearly as dedicated to them as a lot of other people are. I recognize that there's some really true Rush fans who love everything that they touch. I'm not that type of person. They are my favorite band. It's not even actually really that close. I've loved them for years. They've been my favorite band now for about 25 of the 45 years I've been following music. Actually, I think it's 50 years now, so they're probably closer to 27 of those years. There was a brief period at the beginning that Kiss was my favorite band, and then that was followed by Rush for a brief period before they went off into their pop genre era, and I switched to Yes. Mostly, I think I switched to Yes, not so much because I thought their music going forward was better than Rush, because I don't think it was. I think it was because I was starting to discover their entire discography, so that's what happened. So for the next 19 or 20 years, Yes was probably at the top. They were not at the top by a lot for most of that, but they were still at the top. Then Rush came back for me. I don't know what happened. I think I had a friend who was a big Rush fan, a guy that I had met, and kind of turned me back towards their music. So once I got back in, that's all I would listen to for a long time, too. A lot of Rush for a long period there. Anyways, we're going to start with this Decades episode. So the first album by Rush, of course, is their debut album, coming out in 1974. Very different, of course, than most of their discography. In fact, many of their early albums were different from each other as they grew and developed and progressed in their sound to eventually develop the sound they wanted, that they went forward with in the 80s. However, this album, many people have said this is like Led Zeppelin. I actually only hear the one song, What You're Doing. To me, that's the only song. Kind of sounds Led Zeppelin-ish. The rest of it just sounds very hard rockish to me. So you've got Finding My Way, Need Some Love. Yeah, great tune. Take a Friend, good tune. Here Again. These are Take a Friend and Here Again. Unless you're a real hardcore Rush fan, you probably don't even know these songs. In the Mood, of course, was kind of their first real hit. You know, got some radio play, got noticed. Before and After, and Working Man, of course, which is one of their classic, most endearing and most loved songs by Rush on this album. So this album featured, of course, the only aberration on their discography for band members. So on this album, you have Geddy Lee on bass and vocals, Alex Lifeson on guitars, and John Rutsey on drums. So this is the only album that doesn't have the rest of the classic members, if you want to call it. This is the original members. And it's a solid album. I don't think it's aged as well with me as some of their other albums have, but I still like it. I still think it's a good album. It's a 1 for sure. No doubt about it. So next up is one of my favorite Rush albums, maybe my top 2 favorite, Fly By Night. I love the cover. Fantastic. Blue was my color. Blue and white was my color when I was a kid, so this just played right into that. Also, I love this owl. I'm a big fan of birds, so everything played here. This was the first album that I ever listened to in its entirety. Rented it from the library back when libraries still had vinyl, and played the entire album. And my first impression of it was kind of different. It wasn't really what I was used to. I was used to Kiss and more Kiss, and this was not like that at all. The guitar soloing and the guitar riffing was very different than what I was used to. There are some, this is also kind of the beginning of their prog elements too. So you got a couple of songs on here, Anthem and Bytor and the Snow Dog have a lot of prog elements to them. This is the beginning of that prog element. Then there's some songs on here that kind of tied a little bit to their first album, Best I Can. Probably in the end, these songs, very similar to some of the stuff on their first album, tie them together. And then you got some stuff here in the middle. Rivendell, I guess that's a bit of a prog song too. But it's a very ballad type prog song. Although it's not a ballad at all, but it has that same kind of sound that you might get in ballads. And then you have the other songs on this album, Beneath, Between, Behind, Fly By Night, and Making Memories. These are all really strong songs, but more in the mid. They're not like the first album. They're not like What's Gonna Happen Going Ahead. They're kind of different. Almost like there's like a little bit of a commercial sound, at least the Fly By Night anyways. Making Memories, I think, Fly By Night and Making Memories, I think, very similar. I like them both for the same reasons. Really kind of acoustic sounding stuff too going on here. Beneath, Between, Behind, busy, but heavy song still, but great. Anyways, this is probably my second favorite Rush album, and it's their second album released in 1975. Great album. Number 2. Number 3, some people like this album. I'm one of them. This is one of my favorite Rush albums, probably top 3, maybe 4. Probably 4, actually. Very different from the predecessor. So now they've gone completely prog the other way. But you do have Bastille Day here, which I think kind of fits that first album kind of feeling, although it's a little more proggy. And then you have Lakeside Park, which kind of fits in with Fly By Night and Making Memories, a song in that kind of feel to it. It's still probably my favorite Rush song. It has been for many years. I still love it. I think it's because I have a bit of a attachment to the area in which this song was written about. I think I'm Going Bald. This is the kind of the first Rush track that I never really got into. There was stuff on the first album and even on the second album that I liked, but I didn't really follow too much. But this was the first one. I never even really did that. So, but maybe I might change my mind. It's come on a little bit over the last few years. The last 2 tracks, The Necromancer and The Fountain of Lameth, or Lamneth, I guess is the best way to say it. Both of these very proggy epics. So you've got a mini epic in Necromancer's one. It's kind of following the trend of Bytor and the Snow Dog, that kind of mythical stuff going on. So Bytor and the Snow Dog, good and evil. This one about a wizard and about dark forces in the universe and stuff like that. But also has some elements of Toronto, which reminds me of where I grew up as well. The Fountain of Lamnath, of course, is their first album side epic. This has a lot of that stuff that you're going to get coming forward, and really not totally different from the next album, in that it has one side that's fully, and then the other side has a bunch of loosely knit tracks as well. The difference here is this one maybe not as commercial sounding. The album didn't do that well because it has points throughout it that are kind of choppy, I guess is the best way. They're not smooth, but it's a pretty heavy album. So there's a lot of good stuff going on here. I know some people don't really like it because it doesn't have any of that really catchy stuff that you get on 2112, but it's still a fantastic album. And this was released in 1975 as well, later in the year. So this was the year that they had the two. And I did do a video when I did my monthly series. I think it was for March. Bands that had two albums or more in a year. This was one of those bands. I think they were number one. Yeah. So next up is 1976, 2112. Many feel this is where Rush jumped up and became part of the big boys, if you want, or became a iconic band at this point. And this was a make or break album. Let's face it, they did not do good with Caress of Steel. It looked like their career could be over. They even called it the end of the road tour. But then they came out with this, which isn't really all that different from Caress of Steel. Polished more, maybe smoother, not as choppy, and some very catchy riffs at the beginning of 2112, Overture and Temples of the Syrinx. I believe that's the reason why this album did so well. It's those two parts, those two suites in the 2112 saga, really caught fire with the metal crowd, I guess, or the hard rock crowd, if you want. And the album itself has that kind of spacey feel to it. Well, the album looks like a spacey feel, so I don't know if it really has a spacey feel, but it definitely has a prog element. And then you've got songs on the backside that did reasonably well. Passage to Bangkok and Something for Nothing. These were kind of catchy tunes as well. So much more catchiness to this album than maybe Caress of Steel. And hence the reason why it exploded. And really, for many people, this is their seminal album for many people. Not everybody, though. And then you've got a few other tracks. The Twilight Zone, Lessons, and Tears, which are all decent tracks as well. I didn't initially like the second side, other than Passage for Bangkok. I didn't really care for the other tracks, but they grew on me over time. This album is one of the few that didn't make it as a masterpiece for me of the earlier albums, and I think largely in part to that. I think this has a very strong upper part, and then mediocre. The rest of the album's kind of mediocre. You got two or three songs, or two or three parts of songs that are very strong, and then the rest is, to me, kind of mediocre, and that's the reason why it doesn't get that masterpiece label. I know some people will vastly disagree with me here. That's fine. We all hear things differently. Next album up for me is really where it begins. Farewell to Kings, released in 1977. Saw them do Xanadu and A Farewell to Kings. Or actually, it might have been Xanadu and Closer to the Heart on TV. I can't even remember. I think it was in an afternoon. I was about 13 at the time. And it was my first time seeing them live in any venue of any kind. And I said to myself, is that guy a girl or a boy? Yeah, I know that's bad. But anyways, so this album wasn't the first one I owned, but it was the first, those were the first live shots I seen. To me, Xanadu and Farewell to Kings are probably the best side of an album ever released. That's my own opinion. That's my favorite side of an album ever recorded, and probably the most listened to side of any albums I've ever listened to as well. The other side, Closer to the Heart, Cinderella Man, and Mad Rigel, have all had varying degrees of success with me over periods of time. For a long time, Cinderella Man was as strong as the first two tracks for me. It's kind of faded a bit over time. Close to the Heart, of course, I liked it initially, but like most short radio-friendly songs, just didn't stand up as much as it used to. Mad Rigel, I went through a period where I liked it a lot. Cygnus X1's never really been a huge track for me. I do like it. There are parts about it I like a lot, but it's never been a huge track for me. So this was released in 77. Of course, these last four albums, starting at Fly By Night, they added Neil Peart to it. I did forget to mention that. Geddy Lee on bass and vocals and keyboards on those albums, and then you've got Alex Lifeson on all the different guitars, and then Neil Peart on drums and percussion, taking over from John Rutsey on Fly By Night and going forward, also taking over the lyrics. Eventually, he would write everything, and then the other two would do all the music. So it seems to be a very good scenario for the group. So the next album out, from 1978, Hemispheres. So this is the first real, well, actually, it really isn't. Farewell to Kings and this both have a similar feel to them. This one, I think, is much more driven. On A Farewell to Kings, they were doing a lot of complex stuff. This really pushing it as hard as they could. Very complex album for a three-man band, for sure. I never really, I never really cared for Hemispheres, the first side of the album, for a fairly lengthy time. Thus, that's the reason why this album was the last one to be a masterpiece from their albums, because of that. The second side I was in love with almost right at the beginning. All three songs, Circumstances, The Trees, and La Villa Strangiato. All three of these have been among my favorite Rush songs at varying points. Initially, Circumstances was the big one of the three, then Trees, and Trees has stayed near the top for almost the entire length of the time. Was probably my favorite song on the album for the longest time, and I don't think it is anymore. I think it's still up there. And then La Villa Strangiato, not enough can be said about this track. It's probably my favorite non-vocal or instrumental song of any band at any time. I just love it. I think it's fantastic. It's good loud, it's good quiet, it has a lot of stuff going on there. All three of them are hitting on all cylinders, all three members. Fantastic tune. And then eventually I grew to like the song Hemispheres too, to the point where for a while it was my favorite on the track. Brief while, but I still like it a lot. Really brought the volume of this album up. Brought this album up almost probably to taking over as my favorite album. It was pretty close there for a while. It's kind of faded back a little bit, but it's still there. So 1977's Hemispheres. The next album out, Rush's Permanent Waves, my favorite album. Just recently won its battle in the Battle of the Masterpiece Albums. So it'll be going on to the semis. But this was my first album I owned by them. It took off immediately, and probably by the time I pulled it off my playlist, they had supplanted Kiss after a 5-year run as my favorite band, and they stayed on that trajectory for a couple of years until they faded out. But The Spirit of Radio, of course, was the first big hit on the radio that I got to like from them as it came out, and I just loved it. I still like it a lot. Free Will, I liked it even more eventually. It became a little bit of a song that I liked even more. Really strong. Jacob's Ladder has continued to rise over the entire length of the years. It's had a slow but steady trajectory. I like it a lot. Entre Nous had a huge impact. Probably when this album came out, Spirit of Radio and Entre Nous were both right at the top there. And then Entre Nous dropped and has never really come back up. Different Strings, always love it. It's kind of like Mad Rigel on A Farewell to Kings. I like them both a lot, but they've never been my favorites on at any point in time. Natural Science, I think, is the classic song on this album. Another mid-range epic song that follows a litany of these: La Villa Strangado, Xanadu, and The Necromancer, and Vitor and the Snow Dog. All these songs, absolutely, to me, Rush is at their best on those 10-minute, 8 to 10 minute, or 8 to 12-minute songs. So yeah, love this album. It's my favorite Rush album. It's been challenged at times, but I don't think it's going to be taken. This one was the first one in the 80s as well, so 1980. Next up, Moving Pictures from 81. Many consider this Rush's seminal album. Also is not a masterpiece with me, and I know that's hard to believe. I do like side one quite a bit, but I think it was overplayed initially too much when it first came out, and I just got burned out on all 4 of the songs. Maybe less on YYZ than the other 3, but I almost never go to this album anymore. I don't really care to hear these songs because I've heard them so much. The other side is different though. Camera Eye kind of grown with me steadily, kind of like I'm trying to think of the song that I already mentioned here. Can't remember. Oh, Jacob's Ladder. Kind of like Jacob's Ladder that way. It's steadily continued to go up over the years. Witch Hunt, never was a huge fan of this song. This is one of those songs by Rush that I never really warmed up to. I don't dislike it. It's just one of those tracks I just never listen to. And even when it's playing, I'm not really fully cognizant of it. The final track on here, Vital Signs, really pulls this album up for me. I love this track. It's very different than any other Rush song. Some people, for that reason, it's either the least liked or one of the most liked songs on the album. For me, it's the most liked song. It's always been my favorite on the album. Probably always will be. I still love it. When I hear it, I'll turn it up. It does get a fair bit of radio play, but not as much as the other side. So yeah, their seminal album. Many fans by Rush consider this their best album. It was their biggest seller, and they reached the ceiling here, I think. So Rush's Moving Pictures from 1981. So 1982's album, Signals, probably the end of the road for me. Initially, I liked it, but I knew they were going to go further into that techno stuff, and so I never bought any of the other albums for decades. After this was kind of it for me. I kind of gave up on Rush. It just went completely off the cliff, and I really never listened to anything beyond this, probably until some 20 years later. Well, maybe not quite 20 years, maybe 15 to 20 years later, somewhere in there. This does have some good stuff. Did I say Countdown on the last one? I did. It's actually Camera Eye, is what I meant to say. Countdown is on this one. It's a much smaller song. So this has 8 tracks, all shorter, no epic length ones, no mid-range length ones, all. But I did like all of the songs on here at the beginning. I listened to this album quite a bit. For a while, it was in my top 3 or 4 Rush albums when it first came out. But then they all kind of faded away, and the only ones that I still really like is Subdivisions and Digital Man. Those are the 2 I like the most still, and still will listen to when I get a chance to. But the rest of them kind of faded a bit. Album isn't as great as I originally thought, but it's not a bad album. I had it up almost to the masterpiece level, but it's probably more like a low 1, or maybe even a high 2. So this came out in 1982. And then the final album on this list is Grace Under Pressure. So unfortunately for Grace Under Pressure, it was the jump off. Well, I jumped off before I got to it, so I never really gave it a fair chance. It's actually not a bad album. Some of the tracks on here over the years have grown with me a lot. Distant Early Warning, Red Sector A, Body Electric. These are all strong songs. I still like them, probably more than most of the stuff on Signals. So this album has come up quite a bit for me. This is also the first one, I believe, without Just looking to see. I don't think I'm sure he was on here. It doesn't give his name. Without Terry Brown. This is the first one without him. Peter Henderson doing the stuff here. This is a bit of a darker album too. And it's a lot more electronic, although it does have some very intricate stuff and some great drumming on here too. So there's a lot of good things to be said about this album. And it's still growing with me, so it may come up eventually as well. So this is the end of the era, or the end of the first 10 years. So the 10-year decades is finished here on Grace Under Pressure. I'll just give you the albums again in case you're not a Rush fan and don't know much about them. Rush's debut, followed by Fly By Night, followed by Caress of Steel, 2112, A Farewell to Kings, Hemispheres, Moving Pictures, Permanent Waves. I don't know why I did that. Moving Pictures, Signals, gotta like the imagery here, eh? And finally, Grace Under Pressure. So that's the first 10 years. That's the decade of Rush, 1974 to 1984. 10 albums in total, I believe. Yep, 10 albums in total. At least I think it's 10. Yeah, it's 10 albums, sorry. Oh, my back's starting to bug me now. Anyways, I hope you've enjoyed this final episode of Decades. Please hit the like and subscribe. It's much appreciated. It's a bit of a lengthy episode, I know, primarily because Rush is the band that I love the most. And I like talking about these albums. So please, if you have any comments about any of the albums or the series or the band that we did tonight, you can do that. And we will see you next week. We're going to be doing something different. I'm not quite sure what that's going to be yet, but we will let you know on this week, next week. Take care and goodbye.